Welcome back to another Microphone Monday. I'm professional voiceover artist John Bailey, and today I'm going to talk about how to do impressions or imitation or impersonation, whatever name you want to give it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Now, a lot of the stuff that I've talked about previously in the voice acting tips, they have to do with doing a good impression. You have to know where the pitch is of the person that you're doing. You have to know what type of voice they have, whether it's gravelly or raspy, or if it's pinched, or if it's nasally, it's in the nose, or if it's way down in the chest. And there's a lot of different things you have to consider when doing an impression. First of all, it's not always a bad thing to try to do an impression of somebody's voice who's out of your range, because even a bad impression, as Patrick Fraley has taught before, even a bad impression can be a great character voice. You never know when you might need that. And I'm not the only one that has used friends' voices or people that I have met at grocery stores or people I've heard through the drive-thru. I hear a unique sounding voice and I do an imitation of it, and sometimes I'll end up using that voice as a character for something and getting paid to do an impression of that person. And that poor friend does never get paid for it. With friends like me, right? First thing popped in my head when I did this video was doing George W. Bush's voice. When he was president, I did a lot of George W. Bush impression stuff because I thought it was funny. Now, in my defense, I didn't perfect that voice until I heard Frank Caliendo doing it, because it was funnier. So an impression doesn't always have to be perfect if it serves the purpose. Okay, people know, because George W. Bush, when he talks in a regular speaking tone, sounds like this. But when you change it up a little bit, add a little bit of flair to it, it's a whole lot funnier. You know what I'm talking about? So first y'all have to see where that voice is. That voice is in the tenor, it's an upper range. It's not a very low voice. It's definitely not baritone, but it can go up and down. So it's definitely in the tenor range. And it's got a bit of back of the throat quality to it. Hear a little bit of rasp sometime when he talks. Definitely have the Southern Texas drawl. And the way I noticed, I didn't notice it until I heard Frank Caliendo doing it, is that he talks right here on the side of his mouth. There's a lot of placement. That's where we talked about placement before, placing the voice. Place the voice in the back of the throat and the side of the mouth, because that's where he does it. It's got a little tiny bit of nasal quality right up here. So where you place the voice is very, very important. And the pitch of the voice is very, very important. Because if you did that voice down here, you would not know that was George W. Bush. You'd think that was a totally separate creature. But see, that's how you come up with a great character voice. You can take an impression and turn it into something totally different. Because somebody might want a cowboy character. And you might come in sounding like, "Howdy, y'all. I'm here to do some rootin', shootin', tootin', pew, 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 bang, bang." They're like, no, that's not really what we're looking for. You could take the same qualities from that voice, and you could put it down here. Tell you what, partner, it's time to go. Pew, pew, bang, bang. That's what I'm talking about. And all of a sudden, you got to add a little bit of Sam Elliott, and you never know what might come out of you, and all of a sudden, you got this great character. You got this great character that can kill anybody with the one look of one eye. It's called the dead eye. So it just depends. You can pull things from impressions that will create great characters. Impressions are great, to be honest. Impressions are great for parties. And there is a small amount of voiceover work for impressions, like doing voicemail. I did a small job back when I was non-union. I did a small job for, it was a California, I guess it was a realty convention of some kind, and they were doing some voicemails for it, leading up to the convention to let people know about the information and when it was and about the rooms and the location and blah, blah, blah. And because it was done in California and Governor Schwarzenegger was the governor at the time, they wanted an Arnold Schwarzenegger sound-alike. And I went with my gut instinct, which is what I used to think that might have been a bad idea. And then after talking with Rob Paulson, I realized, gut instinct is fairly accurate sometimes. So I went with my gut instinct, and instead of doing a straight-up Arnold Schwarzenegger impression, I went with a little more Will Sasso, overblown, over-the-top Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I was like, "Come to California, come to the convention, and you'll learn how to do a realtor, and then you will be rich." And I would just like change it up and do the, I pulled a little bit from the version that you hear on Conan O'Brien's old show, or Jay Leno, I can't remember. Anyways, the talking face with the mouth on it. I pulled a little bit from that. I pulled a little bit from Will Sasso. Now, doing a straight-up Arnold Schwarzenegger voice is not always. It's still standard voice, and he does like this when he's normally speaking. And it's like what they told me. How would you like to face the biggest villain ever, the devil? That's his normal sounding voice. It's kind of a baritone. It's not really a bass. It's a baritone. It's placed in the back of the throat with a little bit down in the diaphragm. And you've got the accent. It's all back here. And you have to just find those little sounds that make his voice unique. So there's several things, and there's always one good thing, and this is something else I learned from Patrick Fraley. There's always a catchphrase of some kind. And a lot of these guys you see doing 100 voices in 3 minutes, they just do the one-liner. Like for Homer Simpson, they go, "Do!" You know how many people can say, "Do!" And it not even sound like Homer Simpson, but yet they call that an impression. But in order to talk like Homer Simpson, you need to be able to pick up any piece of paper that's in front of you and say, "Good only for date and show indicated on reverse. The management reserves the right to refuse admission by refunding purchase price and determine when or where its holder may sit. Patron's ticket, please return your ticket stub. I bet they have pretzels." So just because you can say "do" doesn't mean you can talk like that. So don't say you can do an impression unless you can do an impression. So I got a little fed up with 100 voices in a minute. Unless you can actually talk like that in character with any piece of paper put in front of you, then you really can't do an impression all that well. You can do the catchphrase of that person. But a catchphrase is a great way to get into character. Like Patrick Fraley talked about doing, I believe it was Cagney. He's like, "You dirty rat." And he said his catchphrase was, "You don't tell me what to do." And that helped him get into the mindset of that character. So everybody there's a little phrase. And Arnold has so many phrases it's hard to pick from. So I just had like a montage of things that I used to use in order to get into. It was, "Get down! Come on, give me your hand! You can do it! Let's go!" There's just some things that he says in every single movie. And I heard that from Pablo Francisco's version. And now something I've noticed that comedians do. Comedians usually, they accentuate the character by actually trying to look like the character, and he stick the jaw and tries to buff up the chest, so you can actually see him trying to physically get into character. That actually is great because a lot of characters that's done in voiceover work, they physically get into it. I don't know if anybody watches The Walking Dead. It's a great show, by the way, but you should watch The Talking Dead from this past week if you have Xfinity and catch up with that. I believe it's on the demand stuff. Go to catch up. And they showed the ADR sessions, which Patrick Fraley also works on. And it shows them doing the zombie ADR. And they're actually walking around like zombies, running by the microphone going, and that's great because they're physically trying to create that character. They're not just standing in front of a microphone doing this. So you can pick and choose what things work for a character. And remember, a bad impression can still be a great character voice. I forget which character it was that I did. I can't remember now. But there was a character I was trying to imitate somebody. I think it was an older celebrity, and it didn't sound right. I can't remember his name. He used to be in a lot of westerns. He actually played Friar Tuck in the Disney Robin Hood cartoon. But I was trying to do that voice he does, and it doesn't quite sound like him. But it does make a great character voice. And it ended up sounding like somebody that I was actually related to. And I've used that voice before. So it works. Just because you can't sound just like a character doesn't mean, or a person or anything else, doesn't mean you can't use that for something later on. My brother and I used to carry around a little digital recorder, a little micro cassette recorder. If we come up with a funny voice or hear somebody and do an impression of it, we just record it and remember it for later so we can go back and you have to do that because you might run into 1,000 people a day. You might hear 800 of those might be great voices that you could use later on. But if you don't remember it and try to somehow save that, because you can't remember everything, that way you can store it for later and you can go back and listen to it and be like, "Oh yeah, that's a great character voice. I can use that for something." So remember pitch, voice placement, all these things have to do with how your impression is done and how accurate it is. And the best way to figure out how close you are is to get a non-biased opinion from someone else, someone that's not a friend, that's not a relative, that's not a fan if you have fans, and they'll tell you all these nice things about how great your voice is, but then you actually go to someone on a website like Voice Artists United or Voiceover Universe or or go to an agency like my agency and they say, "Okay, how does this sound?" Because they're going to be like, this is terrible. This doesn't sound anything like what we're looking for. So you need to get an unbiased opinion. Now what I used to do is I had a tape recorder and then eventually moved up to digital, but I would record the voice and play it back side by side in comparison with the original until it sounded more accurate. for Robert Stack. A lot of people had asked me to do the voice of Ultra Magnus, which was Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. So I just spent a whole day just listening for those things in his voice that made his voice unique. And then I would just go around and start comparing the way he talked. I noticed that he talked a lot down the bottom of his voice, and he never really strayed far from his character. He was always up and down. On the next edition of Unsolved Mysteries. That was my catchphrase to get into that. And I felt there was a lot of nasal, a lot of down in the throat, and a bit in the chest. And he always had this one eyebrow up when he said things, and that actually helped me to get into that character. And I just talked like that for a whole day, because people are like, how do you... Even, I'll tell you, he's a famous person to me, because he's a local Memphis voice actor. But Jack Parnell is Chris Parnell from Saturday Night Live's cast. I believe he was in there a few years back. For a long time, he was on that cast. His dad, Jack Parnell, is a local voiceover artist in the Memphis area where I'm from. And I actually bumped into him in the studio where he didn't realize I was in the booth recording. And he's like, how do you do those impressions? Those sounded amazing. I was like, well, once I realized how to do the voice and picked all the things out that made it sound like that voice, I would just talk like that for a whole day. I used to drive my wife crazy. But she would be like, oh, what do you want to eat lunch today? I was like, I think I want to go to Subway. Eat fresh, Subway. And it would drive her insane, but it really worked, because eventually you get that voice, you do that voice so much that you can just pull it out just like that. You know, no question. Somebody says, hey, can you record this voicemail? Be like, your message was lost in the fray and never to be seen or heard from again on the next edition of Unsolved Mysteries. To leave your voicemail, leave your message at the beep. And I would just come up with stuff like that off the top of my head without having to do this. Hang on, let me get into character. You know, I'd have to go through this elaborate process in order to get into the character. So anyways, you guys stay tuned, and hopefully you learned something, or were at the very least entertained. And if you have time, go back to last week's video and check out my interview with Rob Paulson. It was a very great guy, very gracious, very humble, and just all-around cool guy to learned a lot from him. So I appreciate the interview, Rob. And I want to say happy birthday to him as well. It's his birth month. And I want you guys all that you can, if you're anywhere near the Mid-South area, which is close to the southeast section of the country, if you can come to Anime Blues Con this summer, we are going to have 3 incredible voice actors that have been in all areas of the industry. And I can't say who they are yet, but they are huge. So you should definitely try to come by Anime Blues Con. And I'll try to find the link and put it in the video description below. Because even if you're not an anime fan, these guys have been in everything. And I am really, really looking forward to being there for that. So if I can touch the hem of their garment, perhaps some of their awesomeness may fall upon me. Go check out BKBN for all your nerd news, and stay tuned till next week.